Welcome back to the show. It's We Are Live. Chris Denman, Travis Rowe, live at Midcoast Studio. Pleased to be joined by a very special guest, Travis. We have an actual talented media personality. His name is Randall Karraker. He's from 101 ESPN. You can hear him on the Fast Lane every weekday. What's up, my friend? Good to see you.
Well, that's the first time I've gotten the talented, so that's pretty cool to hear.
We have to placate. You're parked behind me. I don't want an awkward thing when we go out. So.
Good to be with you guys.
Yeah, it's really fun to just have you in studio. I know how busy you are. Everything with the Blues kicking off with preseason last night. We got a lot of Cardinals stuff to talk to you about. We're super interested about you as a person in such a volatile industry, doing everything under the sun in St. Louis sports, and still, I guess, just skyrocketing with such a popular show. So we're really excited to talk to you just about a little bit of the business side of things, where you've come from, and your style too. We always applaud your style. I personally, Travis, I know you feel like this. I love that you'll just put it out in front. You're like, you're going to hear a fan's perspective on how I react to things. So A, wonderful work so far, but B, thanks for just coming in and being part of the show today.
It's interesting how when I started at KMOX, like Bob Burns would get phone calls, and Mike Schmidt was the best player in the game.
Right.
And somebody would say, like, hey, the Cardinals should give up 5 minor leaguers for Mike Schmidt. And Bob Burns would say, but where would you play him? So it was one of those deals where nobody was ever critical of the Cardinals. And I was, because it used to be that it was columnists or people that worked for the newspaper or Jack Buck or whatever doing the open line. So I really was kind of the first fan that gave my opinion.
Right.
And so I'm start doing, and it was a weird time because Anheuser-Busch had bailed on the team.
Right.
Gussie had died and Anheuser-Busch had no interest. And they were treating these guys that I really liked and had developed relationships with, people like Willie McGee and Vince Coleman and Terry Pendleton and Ken Daly. All these guys were going to become free agents. And so I'm going on the air criticizing the franchise.
Oh, wow.
And that had never happened in St. Louis before. You got to remember, there was no sports talk radio except for KMOX. That was it.
Right.
And what year was this?
1989, 1990.
You got to do. It's so tough because we can just click buttons now and literally get any kind of content you want. It is so tough to think of a time where you had to sit and wait for specific types of content.
And remember, that's a great point because we were an information medium. When I started, and I first started doing Cardinal postgame in like 1987, I'd be sitting there after a game, and somebody would call in and say, hey, how's Tony Gwynn doing tonight? Because you had no access to anything, right?
That's funny to hear.
ESPN was quaint.
Yeah, totally an information medium. But because now everybody has their phone and everybody can get how Mike Trout's doing tonight, we've morphed into an opinion medium.
Right.
Well, I was kind of the first guy in town to give the opinion and say, and what the Cardinals are doing here is criminal. It's ridiculous, and it's not fair to you, the fan. And so I would talk to Jack Buck was the guy who essentially got me on the air.
Right.
And he would
Not a
drive
bad
home
name to
listening
bring
to me.
up.
And then we would talk after the show, and I would say, how do you think I did? And he'd say, were you fair? And I said, I think so. And I said, do you think I was fair? And he said, you were fair. And so that's how I got started in the industry. And
that's awesome.
I think the fan who saw this happening kind of bought into what I was saying, too. So they were on my side, which helped.
That's really just, it is. It's so hard to associate with that feeling at the time because, A, you need a DeLorean to go back to that time. But there's, again, just the glut of information available and false opinions, et cetera. So to kind of be at the forefront of that, that's a really special thing to have as part of your career, and then to also be tied to somebody who's, you know, a legend among legends with Jack Buck.
But wait, I would imagine there's also some early blowback also on that because you were one of those pioneers. So what did other media types, and did you hear from the organization when you started to go that route?
I did, and it's really interesting. First of all, I was taking calls, and I was willing to, and I'm still willing to accept any criticism that people might have.
Right.
And yeah, you would get people that say, oh, no, the Cardinals know what they're doing. They, you know, because they were coming off a really good stretch. They had won the World Series in 82, been there in 85 and 87. But this, I could see, was a different era. And the blowback I got, and I don't know how often this has happened, was eventually Mark Lamping became the team president. And he had listened to me all along. He was the president of AB, and he'd always lived in town. So when he takes over in like 93 or 94, He literally invited me into the office one day and opened the books and said, "Nobody sees this. This isn't. I don't do this, but I'm doing it for you to show me what the Cardinals were spending and what they were taking in."
Wow.
Yeah. And I went,
How quickly would someone's cell phone pop out and
yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
So he explained it all to me, and they were breaking even. They were, and this was before Anheuser-Busch still on the team. So he wanted to convince me that they were doing the right thing. He didn't, but I was appreciative of the fact that he at least took that shot.
That's really interesting because at the time, again, I think you'll know what I say when I say this. You were a nobody compared to some of the higher level people, right? I mean, that would be the equivalent. I mean, if you're just talking about tiers, you were in the first tier of your career, correct?
Right.
Like that's super interesting that they would do it, and maybe there was other motivation behind it.
Well,
but if there
I
was
think
genuine,
there were a couple of things. Yeah, I think number one, they knew, once again, because sports talk radio was in its, actually by then, it was still in its infancy. It started in '87 and started here, maybe late '80s, early '90s. But they knew, that because I was on KMOX, a lot of people were listening to me, and B, and this is the biggest thing in my career, they understood that I knew what I was talking about, that I wasn't just some guy that was throwing stuff out there, that what I said there was a method to, I had researched it, there was knowledge there, and I wanted to earn their respect. That was a big thing for me, for them to respect me enough to say, hey, we disagree, but here's what's going on.
Who has been, so if that was, if we're on the scale of things, if that was, I'm guessing, one of your more positive moments with team ownership or management, the negative side, throughout all the sports years and all the different, I guess, organizations you've covered, the people you've dealt with within those organizations, what's been the negative side of that throughout your career? I mean, I have a guess, but...
Yeah, it's 100% Kroenke.
Yeah.
It's, and I had no idea of this until after everything had happened and after the Rams had left. But when I did that town hall meeting, and people still come up to me 5 years later and say, hey, Randy, thanks for saying what you said at the town hall meeting and trying to stand up for St. Louis. That actually was shown in an owners meeting. Dave Peacock told me subsequently that, that the NFL owners saw that because I pointed out that hey, Kroenke doesn't do a damn thing for our community. Every other owner is philanthropically involved in their community, but not our owner. He doesn't want anything to do with us. And it was never him. It was always his underlings or his PR people that would somehow get in touch and say, no, this isn't the way things are going. Overall, I've had a remarkably good relationship with owners in St. Louis. And my approach now is, because Tom Stillman has been here, I've been through like half a dozen Blues ownerships, a couple of Cardinal ownerships, multiple Rams ownerships. So what I always say, and it's not out of arrogance, it's out of reality with all the coaches and players and owners. Look, I've been here longer than you have, and if I want to be, I'll be here longer than you'll be around. but I'm also, and they know this, I'm fair, and that's the big thing. I get texts at the station, why are you such a kiss up to ownership? And I texted back to the guy and said, is it because perhaps the Blues just won the Stanley Cup and the Cardinals are in first place? Like, what do you want me to rip?
Right.
Right.
Like if you're gonna cheer me on when I'm going after them, like understand, like they also can get pats on the back, like that's normal.
Yeah.
Is it difficult to be as critical as you need to be, being in a city like St. Louis where we all live amongst each other so closely?
Proximity
we have that
can
small
be
town feel.
interesting.
It's obviously a major city, but of course it's like 3 degrees of separation. We either went to school with somebody, went to high school together, we work with somebody that works with our wife or goes to school with our kids. Like, is it difficult to say some of the things that you really want to say? And have you had any blowback personally by sharing your opinion on certain issues?
If what I said wasn't born of a great foundation, it would be tough. But that's my goal. My opinion is based on a pyramid. I always try to build a foundation, and Bernie Miklasz actually taught me this with the way he wrote columns, is you build a foundation for what your opinion is, and you give your opinion because it's a reason. You don't just throw stuff out there.
Got you.
And there are going to be times where people are unhappy, but if what you say is born out of reality.
Right.
You just say, well, what's your problem with reality?
To your point, Travis.
I can tell you, millennials have a lot of problems with reality. I can tell you.
well,
hold on a
Wait,
second.
can I interject here? Randy brought something up here.
Okay. Chris Gardner, everybody.
Randy said, you don't just throw stuff out there.
That's
right?
an interesting
Now, Travis.
ethos
Okay.
and
This
point
is
of view.
interesting. I feel like we're going somewhere with
Well,
this.
Travis, you seem to have a bit of a trend with some of your opinions.
His
So-
thought process is similar to jazz.
Now, what? So I want to show Randy. Maybe we can use you as an example of what
boy.
not to do.
Oh, boy.
Here.
you can
dear.
take
So-
this back to WXOS.
So tell Randy one day what you decided to just throw out there as an opinion.
Randy, I was frustrated on the radio, and it was because of the direction of the St. Louis Cardinals. They were concluding the season
Well,
three
I think
consecutive
this
years.
happened-
of not gonna
You're
play.
really giving yourself some padding
I
here.
think this happened right after Mike Matheny was let go. I think it happened right around that
Yes,
time.
and I said, look, it's time to scrap this thing and let's not only go a different direction, but let's think outside the box. And so I was looking. Gardner said I needed to give him a name. He insisted that I give him a name. And so the name I gave him, I said, well, you need somebody that can unite the city.
But you
that
said you
can-
had to fire someone as well. You didn't mention who you said they should fire.
I said, I think he would make a great regional manager for Brooks Brothers. That was John Mozeliak at the time.
Hashtag
He's
fire
a
Mo.
good-looking guy. He's good dad. Why the heck not? And I
Look
said,
at that handsome devil on the screen.
And I
yeah.
said, maybe there's an individual out west that has done wonders for a major city and organizations, sports organizations out there that could come to St. Louis and help. And that gentleman was Magic Johnson. Yes, Randy. I suggested that Magic Johnson take over the St. Louis Cardinals. Excuse me for having an opinion.
Huh.
Interesting. That's definitely outside the box.
Randy Karraker, everybody. You want to just walk off with that. If that's the road we're going to go down, Randy, be careful.
Here's the thing, and I understand the frustration because of the entitlement that Cardinal fans have.
Yes.
And they don't generally look at other organizations and
Right.
they don't understand
No.
or look at the fact that the Cubs finished in last place in 5 straight years to get where they are, or that the Astros did. Here's the thing with Mo. The Cardinals just clinched a winning season for the 12th consecutive year that he's the general manager. They did miss the playoffs 3 consecutive years by a total of 7 games. So they're in the hunt every year. They have a shot every year. And it's hard, especially when you've won as much as they have.
Right.
It's hard to keep winning because the game is set up to reward the Houstons and the Cubs that are tanking and finish in last place. And another thing that we hate to accept here is that the Cardinals are going to work within the confines of a budget. Chris Rongey every day says, I wish they'd spend more money. I wish they'd spend more money. Well, you know what the reality is? I wish our radio station would spend more money and pay me. But
You want Travis Harrell doing overnights, and you can't even afford it. Come on.
so the businesses work within the confines of a budget, and Bill DeWitt is giving them a budget. So I think when you look at A, other teams, B, the reality of what baseball is, and C, the fact that they've succeeded at a pretty high level, I'm generally satisfied. Now, you also have the old, okay, I'll give you 5 years after you win a championship. You get the 5-year pass after you win a championship. We're beyond that 5 years now. So I understand the frustration because the Cardinals, they've given us reason to feel entitled, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
They have
Yes.
spoiled us.
What a great thing to be aware of.
Yeah, but I do think that, number one, we have to be realistic. And number two, reality also includes, think about this. In the last 5 years, you were supposed to have, leading up to this year, I won't even count 2019, but I'll say 15, 16, 17, 18, your number 3 hitter was supposed to be Oscar Taveras, and your number 4 hitter was supposed to be Alan Craig.
Yeah.
And Taveras dies, and Craig gets hurt. And then in the last couple of years, your front of the rotation guy is supposed to be Alex Reyes, and he gets hurt, and you never see him.
Yeah.
So they've also had to deal with some bad luck.
Yeah. But I'm curious.
It's very aware and coherent of you, Randy.
And that's the point. I'm really that was so reasonable. That was well argued. And I'm curious, how frustrated do you get being in the industry for as long as you have and seeing the wackos like myself who say hot takes like that, but on a consistent basis often rewarded because I feel like the tenor, if you will, of sports talk has drastically changed, and we see it on ESPN and FS1 every day.
Sure.
Does that frustrate you, knowing that you can put together a reasonable argument that people can gather around, but it seems that the hot takers are always the one that gets the attention and everyone seems to be talking about?
It doesn't bother me. It bothers me that a guy like Skip Bayless, for example, who doesn't appear to like sports.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
He's operational, isn't
Yeah,
he?
yeah.
He takes direction probably better. He's a robot almost.
Let me
right?
tell you a story about Skip. Bernie Miklasz worked with Skip, and I don't think Bernie would be. I think Bernie might have even told this story on the air. Bernie was the Cowboys beat writer for the Dallas Morning News in the late '80s, and Bayless was there at that time. And the Danny White had gone downhill. They had 3 quarterbacks: Gary Hogeboom, Steve Pallure, and Danny White. And the sports section was running a poll: who should the Cowboys starting quarterback be? And late one afternoon, Bayless calls into the editor and said, "Hey, what's happening with that poll?" And they said, "Well, White's running number 1, Hogeboom's running number 2, and Pallure's running number 3." And Bayless said, "Okay, my column tomorrow is going to be why Steve Pallure should be the Cowboys starting quarterback."
Wow.
And
It's a paint by numbers.
It's all right. It's
Yeah.
all about reaction. So that bothers me.
Of course.
But if I can embrace debate if people know what they're talking about. There's a lot of people that take shots at Stephen A. Smith, and no, he doesn't know everything. I mean, he said Hunter Henry was going to play against the didn't he against the Chiefs?
I've really,
last year?
as an MMA fan, I've loved Stephen A. Smith kind of wading into the MMA waters here. I'm like, oh, he's going to say something really dumb.
Yeah. But if it's the right venue, if he's talking NBA, if
Yeah.
he's talking most NFL, he can, and he used to be a columnist.
Yes.
He can
Right.
come up with a coherent and logical argument. I get the sense that Kellerman does. But I'm not about the hot take because here's the thing. It's not all black and white. In most
Right,
things in
right.
life, there's gray.
Right,
Lots.
right,
And
yes.
you have to be able, in my world, to see that. But I know that the black or the white, the embrace debate, one side or the other
Right,
sells.
right.
It certainly does, and if you can get just enough of that maybe into your programming, where the bosses are like, oh yeah, there you go, get a little
and
taste of that.
That's what Rongey is great about because DeMarco is as nice a guy as you'll ever meet. And so when we had BT, who's really nice, and DeMarco, who's really nice, and me, I like to think of myself as really nice. Not that Rongey is not a nice guy, but Rongey is a contrarian.
Yeah.
And there's, for any good movie, have you ever seen a good movie without conflict?
Where they just
No.
get along and just
Right.
ride off into the sunset.
Yeah, right. Whether the conflict is a bad guy or whether the conflict is cancer or whether the conflict is, the evil doer, conflict, it's what makes it great.
Right.
And not that we have vitriolic conflict on our show, but I think it's an important thing to have. And so I think Rongey does a great job of bringing that to the fast lane.
We have no idea what you're talking about. We
We're
agree
not
on
contrarians.
literally,
Chris and I
literally
always
everything.
100%
Yeah,
of the time.
a guy who grew up in Farmington, Missouri, and a guy from North City, St. Louis.
Well,
Things go really well around here.
Yeah,
Randy.
you see you see the world in the same, through those same rose-colored
Yeah, I
glasses
mean,
and in the same way.
He was thrown off a horse before he was 6 years old, just like me.
Growing up in North City, man, that's how it was. Those crazy North City horses, man.
Now, okay, so within the confines of radio, St. Louis is still very much like I see this. I've been listening to for a little while. There was this thing where it's like podcast, radio. What is this? What is it? Then it all kind of equals out, like almost like streaming services are essentially turning into cable companies right now as we watch everybody break off. With radio, I do find it interesting. It feels like you all are just kicking so much tail on the FM side of things. I know for a fact local TV does extremely well in St. Louis. So you have these things happening. Being a part of a big time FM show with real consequences if you say something wrong, how is that in 2019, maybe as compared to 15 years ago, 20 years ago? Because you guys do have fun. I do listen whenever I can. You guys crack jokes. I know you have a lot of inside humor, and there's intimations of things, but you also, I see it where you get here and you bring it back and you'll kind of bring it around. You have a style and you know the paths to walk where people can't get you, for lack of a better term.
Right, because we always say allegedly.
And it's
No, but and
master's class.
I
there.
will say this:
Broadcasting.
a huge part of the reason that we do what we do and I do what I do is Chris Gardner. Because when we
Okay.
first started
Randy,
out, Chris,
your lies won't sit well here. Okay.
Chris was our first producer.
That's
in the
amazing.
fast lane, And his politically incorrect humor. Well, no, because Bob Ramsey has it, and I have it, and so we all said, "What the hell?" And because it's FM, and there's a younger vibe, and you have a different feel on FM,
Yes.
and you do on a podcast than AM or anything I'd ever done at KMOX. There's no doubt that it's just a more fun situation, and we go in with the idea. Number one, it's three guys sitting at a sports bar talking sports,
Right.
But we go in with the idea that we're going to have fun, and especially in the world now, I mean, whether you are pro or against Trump, when you hear the word, everybody in the world tenses up.
Yeah.
I got to defend my guy, or I got to attack this guy.
Right.
We don't bring that up.
Right.
So we are all about people getting in their car in the afternoon and having fun. And in regards to the radio, the immediacy of it, when the Cardinals are playing and we can give a score if a trade happens. I love podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts, but I do still think that there's a place for that immediacy of radio. And by the way,
Absolutely.
to give you an example, when the whole Antonio Brown suit came down last week,
Which one?
Chris Gardner will love this. The initial one, the sexual assault suit. Somebody texts in and says, "Do you think that if they reach a settlement, this woman reaches a settlement on this suit, that'll take the load off her back?" We had to use that on the air, so we went out and
I tried to just.
so we
I really. just-
so we went out in the hall, and I told our general manager, who was out there, about this text. And he said, "Oh, that's unbelievable." So, yeah, we had to put that one on the air because it's that double entendre that you just absolutely love.
It's unbelievable.
Have you?
Just like I'm not saying it's right or wrong. This is just my
This is what
reaction.
was
This is
said.
just what it is. That's all I can say. I don't get to decide right and wrong. I just react to things that are said in front of me. That's all I can do.
Have you ever had an athlete here? You don't have to mention any names, but have you had
No,
an
no, we
athlete in
need
time confront you about something that you've said on the radio?
It was a
since you've
long
been
time
here?
ago, and I try to make myself available, and I'll admit I don't make myself as available, and hopefully I will now to the Cardinals, because getting off at 7 and getting to the ballpark is a tough thing. Well, now
course.
that our show has been moved to ending at 6, it'll be easier. But yeah, back when I was covering the team on a daily basis, and you'd talk to people, there were two incidents. Number one, there were several pitchers, and I had good relationships with everybody on that team, but there were
Right.
several pitchers who didn't like throwing to Tom Pagnazzi. And they would tell you off the record, yeah, it wasn't that they didn't like throwing to Pagnazzi, it was they preferred throwing to the other catcher at the time. I don't even remember who it was. And Pagnazzi comes up to me and says, "Hey, I heard you were saying that pitchers don't like to throw to me." And I think I even told him, I said, "No, it's just that they prefer throwing to the other guy." And he said, "Well, who'd you hear that from?" And I said, "Well, I'm not going to tell you, but you can ask your starting pitchers if you want, if they prefer throwing to the other guy." And I said, "Just out of curiosity, when were you listening?" And he said, "Oh, I wasn't listening. A family member told me." And I said, "Well, that's part of our problem here, is
Right.
that you have to listen and you have to hear what I said, because I didn't say they don't like throwing to Pagnazzi. I said they prefer throwing to the other guy." And he was bothered by that, but we left on good terms.
Okay.
And then another time, and I totally get it, was at one point in the late 80s, one of the bad years, must have been 88. The Cardinals were really bad, and they couldn't score. And one night they score and they were pitching pretty well. One night they score 11 runs, but the pitching blows up and they lose 12-11 or something like
Right.
that. And so I go up to Vince Coleman and I said, "It must be frustrating after all this time of not scoring. You finally explode and the pitching doesn't hold up." And they were bad, so I get it. He says, "Man, you expect me to just go out and start criticizing my pitchers?" And I said, "No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I just said it must be frustrating." He said, "I'm not going to sit here and criticize my pitchers." And then he went on for 3 or 4 minutes. And
Oh wow.
That's pretty for the time frame that you've had. Those are pretty tame
Yeah.
compared to what you could see.
And then the other one I had nothing to do with. So I'm down in the clubhouse one time, and Albert Pujols comes up to me and says, "Hey, you said I took steroids." And I said, "What?" He said, yeah.
no.
Yeah, he said, Yadi and I were watching you on TV, and you said I took steroids. And I said, when was I on TV? And he said, Channel 5. Yadi and I were watching in the clubhouse before the All-Star game, and you said I was taking steroids. I said, I've never said that you've taken steroids. I have no idea where this is coming from. And he goes on, he says, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. And and I had no idea what the hell was going on. And so he finishes his little lecture, and then Skip comes up to me and said, Skip Schumacher said, did you just get yelled at? So on my way home, I called Rennie Knott, and I said, man, last time I was on your show, did I ever talk about using steroids? Albert using steroids? He said, no. And I said, well, why would he say this? And he said, well, Kevin Slayton was on last week.
Oh, no.
And he was talking about Pujols using performance enhancers. Albert thought I was Slayton.
No. See, Travis, your theory holds up. We do all look alike.
We all look the same. Yeah.
Apparently, Albert had never seen The Pit before.
Oh, my goodness.
Exactly. So that's what that was. And then Albert ultimately, I explained it to him. I said, look, it wasn't me. I wasn't even in town when that happened. So I went up and told him what the deal was, and he apologized to me. But
Got
it was
the
kinda
apology.
weird. Yeah.
That is extremely weird. But I mean, I guess if you're him in passing, you just see a guy that that's around sometimes, and that it just gets locked in your head, right? And
yeah.
it's
Yeah. And the amazing thing about it is that when Albert got to hit 3,000 or home run 600, he told his people, look, the only show I'm going on is the show with Randy and Brad.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he said,
Wow.
I'm not doing any other St. Louis radio. I'll do those guys, but that's it.
That's
so
awesome.
We've developed a really good relationship since.
Do you want to announce here today that you are going to be the next play-by-play man for the St. Louis Battlehawks? All of you should be ashamed of that. All of you should be ashamed. All of you. First off, I love the organic energy that's now starting to surround the XFL here at St. Louis. And now that you're on board,
I don't know.
do you know what you've gotten yourself into
Gardner,
with
do
the
you have
Battlehawks?
do you have the shot of Randy again? Did you want to do that one more time for the camera? If you wanted to, how did that go?
This camera right here?
Yeah.
So the cacaw movement is underway.
I like wings going, too.
Fly high, Battlehawk.
But we got to do Battlehawks bylaws instead of Rams
We
rules.
do.
Yeah.
We do.
And the final one, which will be bylaw number 5, slow clap it out as you go to kickoff. But we go
Slow flap it out.
ka, 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 ka,
No.
ka,
No.
ka, 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 ka.
Local comedian Sam Lyons is excited to see Randy Karraker on. I just wanted to let everybody know about that.
How do you guys plan on going
They're-
about
are they a
covering
partner
the
of yours,
Battlehawks?
right?
Yeah.
I don't know how you do that because it's, number one, I love what they're doing.
Yeah.
But you can't realistically treat them like we treat the Cardinals or the Blues or Mizzou. And at that time of year, if they are doing February, March, that's against the Blues and that's against Cardinal spring training. So they will be covered, but I just don't know how. And going back to the play-by-play, I've done play-by-play. If they would ask me to, sure. I would.
Nice.
But if they would ask Steve Savard, I think that'd be great because I think Sevy's a terrific
Yeah, he
radio
is
play-by-play
great.
guy,
Right.
football
Miss his voice,
play.
yeah.
And I know there are a lot of good football play-by-play guys in town. So if they would ask me, sure. But I like to answer the question. I like what they're doing. I know we'll cover it. I just don't know how in depth and how crazy we'll go. But I think it's going to be fun, and I think it has a chance. One of the things that the XFL did, and one of the reasons that we got a team, is because our fan base, the hardcore football fan in St. Louis, was rated in the top 8. Now, obviously, they went to L.A., and that they don't have a hardcore fan base. But when we're going against a San Diego, for example, who lost a team, they said, St. Louis really does have a passion for sports and for this sport. So that's why they wanted to give us an opportunity.
That's going to be so much fun. I'm so excited for that.
I think it is, and it is funny, like whether people are being silly or not, like it's like you're building interest.
Yeah.
However that's being done. I like that a lot. Gardner, are you getting the Battlehawks tattoo?
I would like to get one, possibly if they beat those damn Vipers who I
Oh,
just
the
can't
Vipers are the
stand.
worst. Vipers fans are the worst.
They're a whirly bunch.
Pieces of
Yeah.
just
I hate you all.
Throw out the rule books. Right?
no, yeah. Do whatever you have to them and their fans.
Did you see the tweet? I've hated the Vipers for as long as I can remember.
Speaking of, Travis asked me about tattoos. How was your tattoo going?
My tattoo is good. It's
Oh?
Oh, are you
is
not
it-
aware?
No,
you're
I'm
not a loyal
aware.
listener.
No way.
Oh,
There's no
doctor.
tattoo. Shut up. When did this happen?
We're gonna see it live, baby.
It happened on the 24th of June.
Shut up.
To lay the backstory, were you still there with us when I said I would get the tattoo? I think it was like 2011-ish. 2000.
That's tough.
I'm not sure.
I might have been drunk.
So,
He,
that's a great point.
he was getting fired by the man.
So, actually, I think Michelle Smallman might have been our producer at the time. And the Blues were either bad or got knocked out of the playoffs. And I was the exasperated Blues fan. And
Right.
they're never going to win. And somebody said, well, if they ever win, are you going to get a tattoo? And I said, of course, they're never going to win. So this became a thing, and it became a hashtag. And
What?
at the
Yes.
parade when the Blues won the Stanley Cup, I would say half the people that I ran into said, hey, Randy, when are you getting the tat? When are you getting the tat? So
this is when you were in New York. This is
Yeah.
what you
Yeah,
missed.
that's what I
about
missed.
10 days after the Stanley Cup, we did the show from the St. Peter's location of the Ink Spot. They're in Troy and St. Peter's. Big Dave Kanoy, who's a fantastic tattoo artist, the best in town, and I did a lot of research, my due diligence,
Okay.
and I made sure that I went to the best guy in town. So Big Dave Kanoy is doing it. We start the show at 3 o'clock, and Dave says beforehand, he said, look, this is going to feel like I'm dragging toothpicks across your back when I put this on. And I said, okay, I can handle this. And he also warned me, he said, about 1 in 50 people pass out when they're getting a tattoo. Now, I was thoroughly distracted by doing a show
Of course.
as I was getting the tattoo put on. And many Blues fans have gotten tattoos. And there was no way I was not going to pay off the listenership
Right.
when I promised if the Blues ever won the Stanley Cup that I would get a tattoo.
Unbelievable.
Oh my
So-
gosh,
No
Gardner,
way.
we getting it live.
Unbelievable.
Look at
That's outstanding.
I'm getting a picture of this. Hang on, Randy. This is it. Here we
This is
go.
outstanding.
And live in studio, we've got a photo.
Oh, man,
Randy.
that
What a sport.
That is awesome. I
Committed
did not
to
know
his
that.
craft.
I didn't know that. I
That's
didn't
right.
know that.
That's
all
what you're
took
getting,
place.
Caw Nation. That's what you're getting.
This is number one. It didn't go over very well at home,
Ah!
but it's in our business. You have to pay off,
You gotta
right?
pay it
if you
off.
tell people for like 6 or 7 years, yeah, I'm going to get a tattoo if the Blues win. You better get the tattoo if the Blues win. And I like it. Dave did it, as you can see, he did an unbelievable job.
That
But
is
man,
awesome.
it's amazing how many people have gotten Blues tattoos since they won the Cup.
I could have interrupted Randy there. I had a picture. You didn't have to.
No, I wanted the drama.
He
Okay,
wants the
okay.
He's a dramatic person, Gardner.
It is,
Come on.
and I'll be honest, it's still surreal. I know the preseason just got underway yesterday, and I was gone. That's the thing I hate. I was not here for
He
the
was cleaning up
festivities.
for Big Bird in New York.
So since I've gotten back, I'm still trying to catch up on all the excitement that everyone else got caught up in, and it's still they're going into this upcoming season as the defending Stanley Cup champions. How surreal is this moment, and how great is it for St. Louis to be? I mean, after years of what we went through, of course, with the Rams, and now see MLS and XFL and the Blues winning the Stanley Cup and the Cardinals again looking like they're heading towards the playoffs. How does this feel again to see St. Louis finally where many say they should be?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I do think that St. Louis sports fans, especially on the heels of what happened with the Rams, they want to show how great they are. And they have, even though PGA will never release official stats, I was told that we had record crowds for the PGA
Unbelievable.
Championship.
That was very cool to see.
Yeah, the women's soccer team
Yes.
had bigger crowds at Busch Stadium to see them than they did playing in some World Cup games,
crazy.
which is unbelievable. And then, obviously, to win the Cup and get MLS, I think it's great for our town. I've always thought that the only real galvanizing sports in society is sports, the only galvanizing force. religion isn't going to galvanize us. Politics isn't going to galvanize us. The economy isn't going to galvanize us. It's tragedy and sports, and we don't want tragedy, right? So it's sports is the one thing, and championships can bring everybody together, and the Stanley Cup did. And it is surreal to think that after 52 years they won the Cup, and then soon after that, St. Louis gets awarded the MLS franchise, and so many good things are happening on the sports front here in St. Louis.
Let's keep it on that note. Can the MLS positively impact St. Louis? I mean, is it that type of sport? Will there be that kind of support?
I think to an extent it will.
Great answer. You can just hit
well,
period there.
Here's
I
the
agree.
problem. And my friend Bob Wallace has made this point. He was a former general counsel and the executive vice president for the Rams. And the one thing about soccer and hockey and baseball is that they don't attract the more urban sports fan.
Right.
Football and basketball attract the more urban sports fan. So yes, I think that it can galvanize a large portion of the community, but it's not going to get everybody under that umbrella. To the Blues' credit, they're doing an amazing job of trying to get everybody under that umbrella. They've had camps out at Matthews Dickey, and they're trying to get young minority people interested and involved in hockey, but it's a really expensive sport. It's hard to get kids to play. So I do think that MLS, to an extent, can galvanize the community. And by the way, it's not a coincidence that when this entire process started, that announcement that Carolyn Kindle Betts and Jim Cavanaugh and all of those people made was at Matthews Dickey, right? So hopefully we'll be able to get our region more galvanized than it is, and hopefully sports can play a huge role in that.
Oh, completely agree. Gardner, I got to tell folks about Farmington Fall Fest this weekend. Our friend Carly Lawrence, she's the in-game host for the St. Louis Blues. She's going to MC. We've got all kinds of great bands. Farmington Fall Fest, Brews, Blues, and Barbecue. Marquise Knox. Travis, you heard of him?
I have.
He's on tour with Cheap Trick and ZZ Top right now. That's the exciting part, right? Randy knows. Look at him helping out with it. That's good. FarmingtonFallFest.com is where you can head to see the event schedule. You can see all about the barbecue contest, which is backed by the St. Louis Barbecue Council. Again, Friday and Saturday this week. Come check it out. It's only an hour south of here. You can see where I grew up in Murphy Settlement, Gardner. And again, Brews, Blues, and Barbecue. Our friends in Funky Butt Brass Band, John Henry, will be down there. So music, craft beer, and barbecue all weekend long. Come check that out.
Do you ever wonder if the facial hair for ZZ Top is going to turn gray?
Yeah, I'm curious as to if that's something that they have in their plan. Like, is this at a certain point, like when you're 80, do you finally say, all right, I was tricking you the whole time. We were making that happen.
Unbelievable how old. Rick Ocasek was 75 when he died. Yeah. How old these musicians are. I basically accidentally went to Hall & Oates last year at Enterprise Center.
Travis, he's trying to act like he doesn't have their hits.
We'll get an email, hey, tickets available in the break room. So I went and picked some up, and I said, what the hell, we'll go.
Yeah.
They propped them up. It was like, it was. Now, Train opened for them, and Train was great, but these guys are 70.
At least,
And the Eagles, by the way, before Glenn Frey died, and he died at 67, they were unbelievable in their late 60s. But all of these musicians that are really kicking it in their 60s and 70s is amazing.
Yeah. It really is, and it just shows you how powerful money and management is with that. Because if you're 70 and you've kind of, especially that era, like now maybe people do drugs or parties, but like it'd be hard pressed to show me a wilder time on a rock tour than the 60s, 70s, 80s, for what they were getting into. And the fact that you could sell, man, I'm 35 and I did not party half as hard as I hurt every day. I just look in the mirror and I'm like, what am I doing? What's going on here? So I can't imagine being out on the tour, on the road. Gardner, you probably feel like a lot of those rock stars from your partying days. I mean, what's it like waking up feeling like that every day?
40 now. It can be rough at times. There's a reason Daddy had to get a new mattress for his back. No, I heard there was one time Fleetwood Mac came to town, and this might have been 3 or 4 years ago now, and Bob Rammer told me he was going to see it, went and saw it. I talked to him about it the following day, and I said, what'd you think? He's like, he just seemed a little down. I'm like, what is it? He's like, well, that's the last time I'm going to see him. I mean, they're kind of on their way. And I go, what's going on? What's bothering you? He's like, I don't know. I go, I know what it is. Because Rammer and I, we are different, but we're also alike in ways. And so I picked up on something with him. I go, music, we've talked about this, defines your adolescence, right?
Sure.
Defines your youth.
Absolutely.
You see that your band is on their way out, and now you have to face your own mortality,
Yep.
and you're dealing with that in your
That
mind.
was this. That was this last weekend. I don't. need to see
And I
Blake
say
Williams.
that to him, and he's like, yeah, and then walked away from me. He's like, I wish we wouldn't talk about things sometimes.
It's true.
That's how I felt.
that's-
That's how I felt with Lil Wayne. I was like, I'm so old. Lil Wayne. I don't know when I'll see Lil Wayne again. Man, he's leaving. Come on, Lil Wayne, hang out a little bit longer.
Blink 182 in their mid 40s talking about the girl next door. Like, I don't want to hear you talking about a 16-year-old old man. Like, come on.
Randy, this is an important week for the Birds on the Bat. A big win last night, and of course you got a 4-game set against the Cubs this weekend. How are you feeling about the Cardinals' chances, especially coming off Sunday's devastating?
And with no Magic Johnson.
It
in
wasn't,
the executive
but
booth, right,
this has been. I think it's been from a fan perspective. It's been an odd season for me because I was like this. They're not going to get it together, and then they went on this crazy run after the All-Star break, and now we're in the thick of it, and the Cubs are 2 games back. How are you assessing their chances, especially going into the rest of this big week?
Man, I wish I knew. And it's amazing that the Brewers are so close because the Cardinals could miss the playoffs very easily. Mm-hmm. And I really thought that they were in trouble going against Strasburg, Corbin, Scherzer. To win a game in that series is a real positive.
Yeah.
I do think they have to win one in Chicago over the weekend. And then if you can come home with a chance to beat them in that final series. And by the way, they have to go to Arizona before they come home to beat Chicago.
Right.
I will feel good if they can come home with an opportunity to win that.
Okay.
They do face Kyle Hendricks twice in those 7 games, so you've got to win a couple of those other games. But I feel pretty good about them. Now that Carlos Martinez is back, and they would have won the game on Sunday if they would have had Carlos. I think that makes a huge difference. The starting pitching has been fantastic.
Absolutely.
And they do have, not like they did in the 80s, but relative to the other teams in the National League right now, they have the ability to manufacture a run, and they don't, even though most of their runs do come from the home run. The fact that they steal bases, get runners into scoring position, they can win games. It's amazing to me that the Cardinals are only a 500 team in one-run games. You should be better than that if you're in contention. And they have a good enough bullpen, so if they can put some runs together, hopefully they can win. But man, I wish I could say definitively I feel good, but I wouldn't be surprised if they miss the playoffs either.
That's where I feel like things are sitting with me as well. Maybe is that objective or are we being negative?
I think we're being negative. I do.
Hello, self.
Because you walk into a locker room and the players are the same every day, and the thing with this team, and I go, number one, how many times have I said through the great stretch that they had, man, I hope they face some adversity down the stretch because I want them to be battle tested going into the playoffs.
Battle
so
hawk.
now that they're facing adversity, I'm saying, oh my God, what's going on here? Why aren't they winning every game?
That's a great way to assess your fandom, and I appreciate that about you.
Yeah.
Real quick, got to tell you guys about Gateway Powder Coating. Check them out online, gatewaypowdercoat.com. #1 resource for powder coating in the Midwest. Travis, I know you got that rusty smoker sitting at your house.
Man.
It's
I don't know what to do.
embarrassing.
Who should I take it
Well,
to?
Gateway Powder Coating.
There
Say
we
hi to
go.
Mark and the fellas out at Gateway Powder Coating in beautiful O'Fallon, right, Gardner? Beautiful.
God's country.
O'Fallon, that's right. We've got a little bit of time left with Randy. Travis, the greatest show on turf, was a big part of our life. We were the perfect age to go up and then to be involved with it like you were. Some of the positive memories from the Rams days. I mean, they didn't all get washed away with decade of just garbage football, but
no. Here's the thing with getting washed away. I always people that say they didn't enjoy McGuire in '98, that they have retroactive change in in their
does your hand get sore from backhanding people? Like,
here's the
come
thing.
on.
It's like saying, okay, well, got married, had an awesome honeymoon, the sex was great, but then we got divorced, so that wedding day wasn't great. You can't just retroactively change your emotions like that.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't do that with the Rams. As great as that Stanley Cup victory was, being at that first home playoff game in St. Louis where Isaac scored the touchdown on the first offensive play, that's tied for my favorite sports moment in St. Louis. the Greatest Show on Turf was awesome. Dick Vermeil put together such a good group of people.
Yes, he did.
And that's the thing that I love about so many of the championship teams here. There is a real correlation between good people and winning.
Yes.
And
Agreed.
DV,
Agreed.
I'll try to clean it up a little bit here. But, in that first team meeting that he had before the 1999 season, and obviously Trent had been hurt and Kurt was the quarterback, he told everybody, he said, look around this room. Everybody does, and what the hell? See anything? Notice anything? Not really. You know, there's not a jerk in this room. And he used a different phrase, but he said, there's not a jerk in this room. And he said, there's a reason for that. And so I was able to, and the NFL was different. It wasn't a paranoid league at that time.
Right.
So I was able to develop real friendships with all of those guys too.
Wow.
So to have them succeed at that level, and I picked them to go 12-4 before that season started.
I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's in August. I picked him. I was doing the Cardinal pregame show at the studio. Go over to the stadium, and I walk in, and there's Jack Buck. He said, "Are you crazy or drunk?" I said, "No." I said, "It's a different league now, and the Rams had all of these skill position players. I just knew the offense was going to be great. I
Yeah.
didn't know the defense was going to be that great. But that 99, 2000, 2001 group was just so much fun, and I loved being able to be around that group. And I was a season ticket holder, so on Sundays I didn't have to cover them. I watched them from the stands, so it was great.
Fantastic.
If you could have the opportunity to say something to Stan Kroenke, what would you say? And one, would you even want the opportunity? If someone said, hey, Stan wants to have a conversation, would you take that?
An interview, or does he get a closed door?
You just a closed door. It doesn't have to be an interview.
A
Just sit
discussion.
down with him as a man of St. Louis, as a Rams fan. Would you want that conversation, and what would you say if you could?
One of my colleagues, Michelle Smallman, actually had a conversation with him at the Super Bowl a couple of years
wow.
ago, and said everything that I would want to say. And he's delusional. He has no idea that he did either that or he doesn't want to admit it, whatever it is,
Right.
that he screwed up so badly. And he said, I had to leave St. Louis. I had no choice to leave St. Louis. Well, no, you did. You got offered $450 million to help build a $1.1 billion stadium. You didn't spend, or you didn't get a dime of public money in LA.
Right.
You went there
And spent your
to
own, yeah.
be able to make the money from your development in Los Angeles. And I don't find him to be a very socially on point guy. He's very socially awkward. After the team left, I did an open letter to him at our website, and I think that's all that I need to say to him. He doesn't understand the business that he's in. He doesn't understand that when he's selling a ticket and when we're buying a ticket, we're buying emotion. We're buying hope. And he thought that he was moving a Walmart.
Right,
You know,
right,
he had no
right,
idea
right.
that he was ripping the heart out of a community. And he's a bad guy.
That's a great way to put it. I mean,
Yeah.
and to have that too, because you're not gonna get anything. That well's tapped. Like
Yeah.
there's
Right.
there's not gonna be anything fulfilling.
And
come from
to
that.
our advantage, I think if we look 20 years down the road, the Rams have been gone, this is their fourth season away, 16, 17, fourth season away. I think if we would have looked, or if we do look 25 years down the road at spending the money to build that new stadium and where that league might be then, we might say, man, we really dodged a bullet.
Yeah,
Because
that's a good point.
even in Dallas, Texas, high school football participation is down 20%. It's
Really?
down across the board here. Almost nobody has a freshman football team anymore. Everybody combines freshman and JV because moms aren't letting their sons play football. So where are they going to go? And they will have enough players, but they're going to miss out on a lot of the best athletes who are going to other sports. And from a quality standpoint, we saw the best that the NFL will ever have to offer because that team could be coached.
Yes.
The coaches had access to the players, and they were able to coach them up. And we could see hitting, and you can't see hitting anymore. Charlie Clemens almost knocked off Jeff George's head in that game. Now he'd be called for a 15-yard penalty.
Right.
So I do think that the NFL has apexed, and I don't think there's anywhere not that they're going anywhere, but I don't think there's any more upside for them in America. I think it's probably downhill. I think if we look 25 years down the road, we might say, boy, we're lucky we got MLS rather than kept the NFL.
That's really interesting.
Can you believe it's been 10 years since this image first appeared?
My
Look at
goodness,
that.
look at those
Holy
handsome
cow.
devils.
Look at
Oh,
that.
man.
Did I have gray hair then?
I don't know.
10
I'm
years.
colorblind.
Yeah, me too. No, I did. 10
You were-
years.
It was just a touch. You could have been a
Yeah, no, I'm
spokesman
really,
for.
yeah.
Oh gosh, that
I'm
brings
really
back
gray.
the memories.
Oh, it certainly.
But yeah,
does.
we had actually on the same day, the day after, or the Monday after Chris Duncan passed away, we had both DeMarco and Rammer on the show. It was great to hear their voices and talk to them, and I've maintained a great relationship here in town, obviously, with Rammer. I don't hear as much from DeMarco, but two of my favorites, and it's amazing. We had, typical radio story, 2 years in, we have our first #1 book on our show, The Fast Lane at 101 ESPN.
Mm-hmm.
It's at Christmas time. And before we leave at Christmas, we get bonuses for having good ratings. So all the paperwork is set at our computers as we leave for Christmas time. We come back after New Year's, and they get rid of Rammer and our producer. So we had 4 people involved with the show. Chris was already gone by that point, or you were gone by that point, right? So we've got 4 people involved with the show, and they fire 2 of them. And I said, what the hell's going on here? And so they bring me in, the new producer and the program director, and they said, well, here's the changes we want to make. And they're, this. I said, the show just finished #1, right?
That's so great. Like that is,
Yeah.
I've heard 50 million stories like that
Yeah.
in radio. How do you combat that now? You've got Brad and Rongey on, and yourself. You're still going to deal with changes all the time, right? Is that just something? If you're telling that to somebody that's trying to follow your career path, do you tell them like, get ready because this is an unavoidable consequence thing that you deal with?
Yeah, it's part of the deal. With that particular one, it was a new program director that wanted to make his mark, and he thought Chris Duncan was going to be a star, and Chris was going to be a star.
Yeah.
But I don't know why you tear apart the #1 show, but people like new bosses like to make their impact and imprint on radio stations, TV stations, companies. Yeah, and it is. It is something that is a hassle to deal with in radio, but it's nothing that we wouldn't see in the real world, right? Because there's a lot of businesses, most businesses, where you're either going to get laid off or you're going to wind up getting fired. So I look at it like this: I could be working for a living, so I'm willing.
That's what you have to remind yourself.
I'm willing to take that bad. And the other thing I've learned in the business is getting good with the GM. See if you can get to a point where you can talk to that GM on a regular basis, so that if you do get whacked, there's a real good reason for it, and it's not just somebody trying to make an imprint.
Well, I have to say, I grew up in St. Louis. I've been watching and listening to you, and it has been a true pleasure to have you on. And Gardner and I were just joking about the pit and how you guys would go toe-to-toe. Like, that was my first introduction to sports debate, and you guys were so fun, and I truly appreciate it. I just remember you. I used to always go, like, I don't know how Randy can keep up with Charlie Tuna because he is crazy. He is doing a hell of a job.
Tuna thinks OJ's innocent. That's all you need to know.
That's why I was like, oh, man, they got Randy against Charlie today, huh? I don't know if that's going to work out fine because Charlie be all over the place.
Charlie and I love each other. We have a great relationship. And once again, that's what's wonderful about sports is that you can have that debate, and it can be heated, but everybody's smiling at the end of the day because it really doesn't mean that much.
Right.
What a great way to wrap things up.
I
Gardner,
got
what do you
one
have?
final question. Not who the best producer you've ever had is, but who's the funniest producer you've ever had in radio?
We had this guy, and DeMarco Farr affectionately nicknamed him Bear. And
What?
he was this is a true story. Like about a year before BlackBerry went out of business, Chris Gardner said, "You got to get one of these. These are the best." So, I mean, we get smartphones all over the place. And he shows me this BlackBerry. So I went out and got the exact same phone he had and spent like $400. These are the best, and then they go out of business. But no, there is absolutely no doubt, and this is if you know about Secretariat and the Belmont winning by 31 lengths, it's Chris Gardner, and then it's the rest of the field. That's the funniest producer the fast lane has ever had.
That's why we have tea times occasionally.
Good for you guys. Wow. You can listen to radio on 101 right here in St. Louis. Also, you can go to the website, 101ESPN.com. Podcast, all kinds of great information and sports updates as well. 2 to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. Listen live as we all do as well. So what a pleasure to have you in.
Thank you
Randy.
so
I
much.
thoroughly
for doing
enjoyed
this.
it.
Really
No, great to talk to you
Thank
guys. Thanks.
Well, I hope your back's not extra sore from carrying another hour of programming today. So we got to get you back in sometime soon,
Anytime.
Randy. Thank you, sir. Big thanks to our friends at St. Louis Counseling, all of our other great sponsors. And remember, Happiest Hour, the comedy series, returns Thursday right here in Grand Center at Sophie's.
Edgy comedy, Chris.
Really edgy
Pushing
comedy.
boundaries
That's
this
right.
Thursday.
We're going to be auditioning people for the new Saturday Night Live role this week. Free comedy.
I know what to avoid.
This Thursday.
Exactly.
Thanks.
Exactly.
Asian Americans are welcome at our show. I'd like to say that. Thanks to Jack Daniels and Schlafly for being a part of that comedy series as well. For Randall Karraker, Travis, and the greatest, funniest producer of all time, Chris Gardner. We're back live tomorrow at 8 a.m. We'll see you then.
Peace.